I am continuing in my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am continuing reading in a chronological order, according to event, not according to publication or volume, so I'm skipping around a bit as I move along. We are continuing in the Gospels. We have entered the final week of Christ's mortal life. It is now Passover, and we are at the story of the Last Supper. Now, we read the account of the Last Supper in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and now we are going to read it in John. In this video, we have a Joseph Smith translation. Now, what the Joseph Smith translation is, this is a translation or correction done by Joseph Smith to restore those passages that have been lost or corrupted over the years. John chapter 13, verses 1 through 30. Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour was come that he should depart out of this world unto the Father, having loved his own which were in the world, he loved them unto the end. And supper being ended, the devil having now put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he was come from God, and went to God, he riseth from supper, and laid aside his garments, and took a towel, and girded himself. After that he poured water into a basin, and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel wherewith he was girded. Then cometh he to Simon Peter. And Peter saith unto him, Lord, dost thou wash my feet? Jesus answered and said unto him, What I do thou knowest not now, but thou shalt know hereafter. Peter saith unto him, Thou shalt never wash my feet. Jesus answered him, If I wash thee not, thou hast no part with me. Simon Peter saith unto him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Jesus saith to him, He that is washed needeth not save to wash his feet, but is clean every whit. And ye are clean, but not all. For he knew who should betray him. Therefore said he, Ye are not all clean. Note here that this is taking place after supper. John does not record the instituting of the sacrament. He is telling us what came next. The apostles and Christ have eaten the Last Supper. The sacrament has already been instituted. Now Christ girds himself as a servant and washes their feet. The washing of feet is an actual ordinance in the church. It was practiced, or it was restored, through Joseph Smith, and was practiced in the School of the Prophets in 1833. And it is an ordinance that was performed by the president of the church for the rest of the leaders. And so, when the School of the Prophets opened in January of 1833, Joseph Smith washed the feet of all those who would be part of the School of the Prophets. Now, I don't know the full significance of it. I know it is a cleansing ordinance, as it says, he who has his feet washed is clean every whit, doesn't need any more. But the full significance of it, at this time, I am not completely sure about. But it is an ordinance. It's what we had in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Christ instituted the ordinance of the sacrament. Here he is instituting the ordinance of the washing of feet. Now, this was an ordinance that was part of the law of Moses. And he is kind of reinstituting it as he reorganizes the church in a new dispensation. And I love Peter's reaction. Peter, when Christ goes to wash everybody's feet, he comes to Peter. And Peter says, no. I mean, people's feet back then were filthy. They were walking in the dust and they're walking on the roads where the animals also travel. If you get my drift, their feet are not clean. And so this was a job reserved for the lowest of servants. And he has too much respect for Christ. He doesn't want to put Christ in that position. You're not going to wash my feet. But then Christ says, if I don't do this, if you don't receive this ordinance at my hand, you cannot be associated with me. And as soon as Peter is taught that, he says, okay, but no, not just my feet. Wash my hands again. Do it more. Cleanse me all the way. I don't want to just be associated with you. I want to be as closely associated with you as I possibly can. That's Peter's faith and his desire. And I love that. But let us get back to the reading. We pick it up in verse 12. So after he had washed their feet, and had taken his garments, and was set down again, he said unto them, Know ye what I have done to you? Ye call me Master and Lord, and ye say, Well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, ye also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example, that ye should do as I have done to you. Verily, verily, I say unto you, the servant is not greater than his Lord, neither he that is sent greater than he that sent him. If ye know these things, happy are ye, if ye do them. So again, we have here Christ now, he's done the washing of the feet. He's demonstrated the ordinance. He now puts on his regular clothes. He's no longer dressed as a servant. And then he explains to them, this is an ordinance that you need to keep doing. That's what he's saying here. The ordinance has been established. You continue to do it. And don't think, see, I've done it to you. Don't think you're better than me, that you can get out of that. You don't need to do this. If I did it, the servant is not greater than the Lord. I am your Lord. And if I am doing this, you need to do it. Verse 18. I speak not of you all, I know whom I have chosen, but that the scripture may be fulfilled, he that eateth bread with me hath lifted up his heel against me. Now I tell you before it come, that when it is come to pass, ye may believe that I am he. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that receiveth whomsoever I send receiveth me, and he that receiveth me receiveth him that sent me. When Jesus had thus said, he was troubled in spirit, and testified, and said, Verily, verily, I say unto you, that one of you shall betray me. Then the disciples looked one on another, doubting of whom he spake. Now there was leaning on Jesus' bosom one of his disciples whom Jesus loved. Simon Peter therefore beckoned to him, that he should ask who it should be of whom he spake. He then lying on Jesus' breast saith unto him, Lord, who is it? Jesus answered, He it is to whom I shall give a sop, when I have dipped it. And when he had dipped the sop, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. And after the sop, Satan entered into him. Then said Jesus unto him, That thou doest, do quickly. Now no man at the table knew for what intent he spake this unto him. For some of them thought, because Judas had the bag, that Jesus had said unto him, Buy those things that we have need of against the feast, or that he should give something to the poor. He then, having received the sop, went immediately out, and it was night. So here we have Christ declaring the betrayal of Judas. Now in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, he declares that first. Then we get the institution of the sacrament. Here we have it's after supper. Sacrament's already been instituted. We now have the institution of the washing of feet, and then he declares Judas Iscariot's betrayal. This is actually very similar to how it is in Mark, especially in the Joseph Smith translation, as we read that he even makes this statement, what you're going to do quickly, in the Joseph Smith translation, which we will read again. We have read it once, we will read it again. He indicates Judas as the traitor by giving him a sop. Now what this is, the way they would eat, you would have a big pot with a kind of a stew in it, and each person would have their bread. And the bread wasn't nice, soft, fluffy bread like we have today. It was hard, crusty bread that you could take and use kind of like a spoon. You would dip it into the stew, pull out a piece of meat or a potato, and then eat it with the bread. And you would break pieces off the bread, and that was your sop. You would sop it in the soup. And so what Jesus did is he dipped the sop. He got a piece of bread, dipped it in the stew, and handed it to Judas Iscariot to show that he was the traitor. Now the other thing is where it says there was the disciple laying in his bosom. And what this is that at this time they didn't really have chairs. The tables were somewhat low to the ground, and you would sit on the ground with your one arm resting on the table, your feet stretched out. The person sitting in front of you would sit leaning back against you and would be said to be laying in your bosom because he's the closest to you in front of you. And that's how they would sit. And so what this is Christ is sitting and John is sitting directly in front. That's what he means by the disciple that Christ loved. This is John. And so John is sitting in front of Christ, leaning against him, or not against him, but he's sitting closest to him. And that's why Peter asks John to ask Christ, because he is the one closest to Christ. Now, we do have some Joseph Smith translations. There's not many, but let us take a look. Here we go. In verse 8, it says, Peter saith unto him, Thou needest not to wash my feet. Instead of, Thou shalt never wash my feet. Thou needest not to wash my feet. Saying, it's okay, you don't need to do that. Verse 10 now states, Jesus saith to him, He that has washed his hands and his head needeth not save to wash his feet, but is clean every whit, and ye are clean, but not all. Now this was the custom of the Jews under their law, wherefore Jesus did this, that the law might be fulfilled. So this clarifies that, yes, this is according to the law of Moses. Christ is doing this. See, according to the law of Moses, you were supposed to have your feet washed before the meal. Anyways, in verse 19, we just have the addition at the end. Instead of believe that I am he, it is believe that I am the Christ. And while this doesn't seem in the modern day to be all that significant, it actually is in the fact that it shows us that the Jews understood who Christ was, or at least partly. They were looking for Christ. And so for Christ to say, you know that I am the Christ, he's saying, you know that I am the fulfillment of these promises, of these prophecies. I am the one that everyone has been waiting for and looking for. We're going to leave that there, and we're going to have a video combined in all 4 Gospels next, so we'll see you there.